be talking about raising godly men. I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the Woods Boys over on 11bangbang channel, and sharing things that they won't share about themselves. But growing up with the Woods Boys, we started out with Garrett. He was my second child. He's my oldest son, and we had 5 sons, 5 boys, 5 girls. First of all, his mama would always say, I'm not going to raise no sissies. She always said that. I'm not going to raise any sissies. And she let those boys know that. So anyway, we took these boys out when they were young. And the first time they shot a gun when they were little kids. And I don't care if I get in trouble for this. I don't care if my YouTube channel gets a strike for this. I couldn't care less. We took them out when they were little, and I would give them a shotgun, usually a 12 gauge, sometimes a 410, depending on their age. But we'd give them a shotgun, and they'd be all excited, and you can shoot your gun, shoot this gun. And with Garrett, I maybe went a little overboard, but I took a gallon can of red paint, took him out to the old junk pile hill in Sun City, gave him 12 gauge shotgun, and showed him how to cock it, how to hold it, gave it a talk about, don't ever point this at anybody. We had a long discussion, and then I handed it to him, and I said, shoot that can over there, a big gallon can of red paint. So Garrett shot that, and of course it splattered red paint everywhere, and I said, hey, listen. I said, if you ever aim this at somebody and you pull the trigger, I said, that could be their head. Now, I know that's a little violent and a little rough, and the boys usually had to pick themselves up off the ground after they shot their first shotgun. I'd give them a powerful load, and I wanted it to kick them hard. I wanted them to see what it could. I wanted them to respect the weapons. So Garrett would pick himself up off the ground and dust himself off, and and I said, don't you be whining about how bad your shoulder hurts. I said, I'd always ask him, you want to go shoot gun? Oh yeah, Daddy, I want to go shoot the gun, And I'd say, you don't want to whine about and cry. We didn't ever want our boys to be whiners and complainers and to be bums in society. And so let's not, don't be crying about it. And so Garrett, he was raising Garrett. That guy had a million thoughts in his head. He was excited about life when he was a little boy. He was always thinking about something. He was just a born leader. Garrett was just outgoing, happy, laughed all the time, never paid attention much to what he's doing. Now, when it came to guns, he did. But the rest of life, there'd be times I'd take him into the store. He'd be wandering through the store. His brain was always operating. He always had ideas, and he'd be walking along. He'd run right into a post at the store. Always trying to solve problems. Always loved people. And so he was my oldest. And then of course we had Ethan. He came along. Ethan was sharp. Ethan was really smart, and he learned to read all on his own. I don't even know who taught him. Before he was in school, he was already reading. He picked up books and just figured out how to read. He would stand in his bed at night and he would practice talking and until he'd fall asleep. And every night I'd have to tell him, you be quiet, you sit down, lay down, get to sleep. And so, he practiced all the time, and he loved to read his books, just like his son, my grandson, Jeremiah Johnson Woods. Just loves to read books, and so Ethan would always read books. He always loved Civil War. He always loved the Revolutionary War books, and so Ethan would always talk to me by the hours. He was the storyteller, Garrett was quite a storyteller too. Garrett, a fantastic storyteller. And Garrett loved to read history. Ethan loved to talk about war. Garrett loved to talk about history as if he was there at the time, and everybody in town, the old men, would laugh about Garrett, the young man. They'd always say Garrett was born old, because Garrett would always talk about, he'd read about local Sun City history, Barber County history, and then he would always seem to incorporate himself into that as if he was there. And all the old men in town used to laugh and just say, Garrett's an 8 or 9 year old man. And Garrett went through the Depression. Garrett went through the Civil War. And it was just respectful, but kind of a joke, you know. And then Ethan always studied about war and guns and one thing and the other. Ethan would sit for hours and tell me stories. That guy would just sit there and he would tell me about the Ethans. And he would make up this big story about how he had this great tribe of warriors and soldiers, and they had built their own homes, and it would be the Ethans. And if he was upset at his sister, he would have the Ethans versus the Lydians, or the Ethans versus the Sylvians, or whatever. And he would just build in his mind. He'd build these stories, and they'd go to war, and they would always come back victorious, you know. And then along come Caleb. Caleb, just the happiest fella you'd ever want to meet. Caleb, I remember one time I told Caleb to do something. We would go work in the garden, and he didn't do it. And he was just a little boy, and I'd made it clear, and he didn't do it, and he didn't obey me. And I picked him up, and I said, Caleb, I said, much as I hate to, I said, I'm gonna have to whip you. You're gonna have to get your punishment, because I said, I very clearly told you to do something, and you didn't obey me. And I picked that kid up, and he reared back and smiled from ear to ear, and he said, oops, Dad, I guess I made a mistake, didn't I? I said, just get down, go on, go do what you're told to do. I couldn't bring it into me with that big smile on his face. And so Caleb has always been, everybody in the community knows him for being a super hard worker. He's worked for a number of years with drilling water wells, one thing and the other. Very highly respected in the community for his hard work ethic. And but all the men in the community call him, you know, Smiley Caleb, Smiley Caleb. And there's always a joke. People would say, you just can't rile him up. You can't rile him up. Well, there's been 2 times I've seen him riled up. 2 times in my life. One of them was when one of his sisters was working at a convenience store on a major highway, and there was a man that came in there and was being abusive. She called me. I rushed down there to confront that man as quick as I could. Caleb jumped in the car with me. We headed down there, and we got that man cornered. And I started saying, now you listen to me. You're not going to treat my daughter this way. And Caleb, who's over 6 foot, he walked in right behind me, and he said, that's my sister. And I'd never seen him like this. He said, that's my sister. And he said, you better not ever say one cross word to her ever again. And that guy literally started shaking, and he hollered, and he said, get out of here. And he ran and hid in the back when Caleb stood up to him. And another time was a bad situation in our town, our community, and a young man was very high on drugs, and he was literally about to kill an old man. And my sons heard it going on. I wasn't in town at the time. They were just down the street with some friends, and they heard the commotion, and they ran over there. The police were about 40 minutes away, because we live way out in the small town. Garrett ran and grabbed the young guy that was high on drugs and physically picked him up and threw him over his shoulder to get him away from the old man. The old man was turning blue. The kid was choking him. The old man had cuts in his neck. He was bleeding everywhere. And Garrett went and grabbed that guy and threw him over his shoulder and carried him across the yard, set him down under a tree, and said, you stay there. Well, as soon as Garrett had turned around, that guy jumped up from under the tree and he ran and he tackled that old man again. Well, this time Caleb got a hold of him. Caleb picked the guy up, threw him over his shoulder, carried him to a vehicle, and put him in the vehicle. And Caleb held his arms and hands, and Garrett got in the car and drove. And they just had to get him away from that old man, and until the police could arrive. And so Caleb held the guy's hands and arms, and Garrett would say every once in a while, he said, I'd hear that guy get mouthy, and Garrett said I'd hear a big whack in the back. And later I said, Caleb, were you whacking on him? He said, no, Dad. He said that was just his bones popping. I was probably holding his hands too tight to keep him from getting away. I said, come on, Caleb. But my boys are men, and I'm proud of them. And they took that guy out of ways, a little away from the scene to where it would take him. And by the time the guy had walked back to the scene, the police were already there. And so those are the only 2 times I've ever seen Caleb get upset. And if Caleb would tell people in town, and they said, well, Caleb, good for you, you know, we're proud of you. And Caleb would say, well, there's just 2 things. He said, don't mess with my mama or my sisters. And he said, don't mess with old people. He said, I got a problem with people who will hurt an old person who can't fight back. And Caleb said, that's about the only thing in life that he said really upsets me. So anyway, so Caleb and Ethan, and then Ethan one time went off to, my son Ethan, he went off to time to go to war. Now let me tell you where I stand on this. I have no problem with right kind of military. But since the project for a new American century, just prior to September 11th, and the neocons took over, I have not been the least bit excited about a lot of these foreign wars that are going on for the global elite. And Ethan came up to me one time and he said, Dad, I know you don't like what's going on in the world, but he said, I'd like to join the military and I'd like to get for you. He said, I want to honor you. I want to get your blessing. So I said, well, we talked about it for a little bit. Donald Trump was the president at the time. My son was, Syria was kicking in. And I prayed about it for a little bit, and I thought about it, and I came back and I said, Ethan, I said, is this really what you want to do? And he said, Dad, this is what I want to do. And I said, you know what you're getting into. He said, I know what I'm getting into. So I talked with Ethan for a while. I knew his heart was set on it. I knew this is all he'd wanted all of his life. And so, and I knew the country had taken a turn for a little while. And for the good, a little bit for the good. And I said, you just keep your eyes open. And I want you to watch what goes on in the military and around the world. And I said, I'll give you my blessing, son. And so Ethan went off and he joined the military, and he went and served in Syria. And he found out who ISIS was, which he said, Dad, everything you said about what's going on in the world, he said, I saw it firsthand. And he said, Dad, you were right. And he'd share with his battle buddies. He said, my dad knows what's going on. And I developed a friendship with a lot of those guys, and Ethan's military leader talked to me one time, and he said, we're glad to have Ethan. He said he loves guns, and he said he loves to clean everybody's gun. He said Ethan became an instant friend of everybody, because he said he always wants to clean somebody's gun. He wants to help them out. He wants to show them. And so Ethan's military leader just said that he said, we really depend on Ethan. He can unjam guns. He can take and restore guns for us. And he said, we want him to start training other guys in guns. And they unofficially let him train a lot of guys in how to shoot and all of this stuff. So, I'm proud of Ethan. And then old Noah, he's our youngest, you know. Old Noah, my wife went in to have Noah, and the doctor said, what are you going to name him? Well, this was our 10th child, and my wife said, we're going to name him Noah. Noah More Woods. The doctor got a kick out of that. No more woods, Noah More Woods. So Noah was our son of peace. That's what Noah means. And Noah, just like Caleb, is a very gentle soul, and he just he loves people, and he loves history, and he loves his brothers, and he's just kind of been the baby of the family, and the other fellows understood that. And so, you know, when Christmas time came, all of his brothers were older and left the home and were married and working jobs. So, you know, it was pretty sparse whenever Garrett was there. We had Christmases where there wasn't a lot of money. And Ethan and all of these guys, and I mean, they just didn't get a lot for Christmas. But, you know, when you're the baby like Noah, and you have Garrett and Ethan and Caleb, and we'd adopted a young man named One, and you got all these brothers like that, and they're all working jobs. Well, I don't know how many times it'd come Christmas time, and they'd say, we got a surprise. And like one Christmas with Noah, he they said, close your eyes, and Garrett put a blindfold on him, and they brought this motorcycle in, this dirt bike, this high-powered, big dirt bike, nice dirt bike that all went together, and bought it for Noah. And so they undid it, and there he's sitting there looking at this dirt bike, and he's, oh boy, you know. So Noah's the baby, and Noah's the baby, that's right. And so Noah's a blessing, and he's a gentle soul just like Caleb. But I can share a lot of stories of growing up with the Woods boys, the 11bangbang Woods boys. There has never been a dull moment. We live way out in the country in an old western town. The buildings all still have the false front. The law is 40 miles down the road. A lot of times we've had to take care of our own problems. I could go on and on about all the stories that we've had growing up, and times, there was a time when my kids were shot at. Ethan was shot at. And maybe I'll share that in the future. We had come across a meth lab. The kids out on a walk, and come across some folks that were making meth, and one thing led to another. Next few days, my kids are being shot at. I'll share that story in the future. We live in the Wild West. We live in an old town that's it's always been kind of a hideout for outlaws, because there's never been law in that town. And if you have a problem, you usually have to take care of it on your own. And I'll share more of those stories, and my boys probably don't want to hear it, but it's good for them. I'm the dad. I can say anything I want. I don't care what they say. But I'll be sharing that some more maybe in the future. The 11bangbang boys. Go to that webpage and look at those boys. And the boys, they're men, but I call them my boys. And look at what they've done. They've done a fantastic job. All right. I'm Pastor Jeff Woods. Trust in God through Jesus Christ. Keep your powder dry.